You know, of all the stories that haunt the deep, dark sea, there's one that really stands out. It's a tale of pure rage, of damnation, and a ghostly light on the horizon that means your time is up. So today, we're sailing right into the heart of that storm to explore the legend of the most feared ghost ship in history, the Flying Dutchman. I will round this cape even if I have to keep sailing until doomsday. Just think about those words for a second. That's the oath that started everything. A furious, blasphemous shout screamed right into a hurricane by a captain who just refused to lose. It was a cry of defiance that cursed him, his ship, and his crew to sail the oceans forever, never, ever making it home. Okay, so let's really dive into this. To understand the ghost, you have to understand the man. You have to understand the single moment his entire fate was sealed. Because this isn't just a ghost story, you know? It's a story about human pride and the absolutely terrible price that was paid for it. I want you to picture this. The year is 1641. We're in the age of wooden ships and, well, iron men. For the big European powers, the ocean is basically a highway to unbelievable riches. But it's also terrifying and mysterious. And nowhere is it more terrifying than at the Cape of Good Hope. It's this treacherous bit of water off Africa where the Atlantic and Indian Oceans just slam into each other. For sailors, it was the gateway to the treasures of the East. But yeah, more often than not, it was a graveyard. So the whole tragedy really played out in 4 acts. First, you have the homeward journey. Captain Vanderdecken is sailing back to Holland. His ship's full of cargo, he's thinking about the money he's going to make, the fame. He's so wrapped up in his own success that he completely misses the warning signs in the sky. And that leads right to the sudden storm, a monster of a tempest that just ambushes his ship. They fight it for hours, but the Cape, it doesn't forgive mistakes. And then comes that sound that every sailor dreads, the sickening crunch of the hull hitting rocks. The ship is going down, and as that freezing water is washing over the decks and he's staring death in the face, that's when Captain Vanderdecken screams his doomsday curse at the storm, at God, at fate itself. But the story doesn't end with the captain's death. Oh no, the curse, it took on a life of its own. His challenge was answered, and his punishment was to sail those seas for all eternity. His ship became a phantom, a terrifying omen of disaster for anyone unlucky enough to cross its path. And right here, this is where the real terror of the legend kicks in. You have to remember, for sailors in a world run by winds and waves they couldn't predict, superstitions weren't just silly stories. They were a way to make sense of the chaos. And the Flying Dutchman became the ultimate boogeyman. Seeing it wasn't just a spooky moment, it was a death sentence. To see those ghostly red sails meant your own ship was headed for the bottom, and your life was over. It gave a face to every sailor's deepest, darkest fear, dying a bad death, a long, long way from home. And look, these accounts weren't just whispers in some portside tavern, they were written down in official ship's logs. Take this one from 1835. You've got the crew of a British ship, they're in the middle of a nasty storm, just trying to survive, and suddenly, out of the chaos, they see the silhouette of another ship, and it's bearing right down on them, a direct collision course. Can you imagine the terror? They're all bracing for impact, for the splintering of wood, the screams, the whole horrible end. But in those last few heart-stopping seconds before the crash, poof, it just vanishes. It's gone, leaving the crew soaking wet, absolutely terrified, and 100% convinced they had just seen a ghost. And that wasn't a one-off thing. These sightings kept happening for centuries. And what's really striking is who was seeing it. These weren't just, a few scared sailors. We're talking about decorated naval officers, future kings, and even battle-hardened U-boat crews from World War II. I mean, just look at this timeline. It shows a really startling pattern. In 1881, you've got a royal sighting aboard the HMS Bachante. Jump ahead to 1923, and you've got British Navy officers formally documenting what they saw for, get this, psychical research. Then, in the middle of World War II, Admiral Karl Donnig himself, the head of the German U-boat fleet, noted that his crews are logging sightings in 1939. And even as late as 1942, there's an official entry in the ship's log of the HMS Jubilee. These are serious people from different eras, all seeing the same thing. Let's just focus on that 1881 sighting for a minute, because it's probably the most famous one. On board the HMS Bacchante were 2 British princes, and one of them was Prince George, the guy who would grow up to be King George V of England. He and a bunch of other crew members saw a phantom ship glowing with this weird, eerie red light. But it's what happened next that really cements the legend. Remember the superstition? If you see the ship, you're marked for death. Well, the very next day, the sailor who was the first one to spot that ghost ship, he fell from the rigging and died on the deck below. For everyone on that ship, it was proof. The curse was real, and it had just claimed another victim. Okay, so with testimony that compelling, from witnesses that credible, it's really easy to see why this legend feels so real. I mean, for a long time, people were absolutely convinced the curse was true. But as always, science has another idea, a natural explanation for what seems like a totally supernatural event. And the scientific explanation has a fittingly magical-sounding name, a Fata Morgana. It's actually named after the sorceress Morgan Le Fay from the King Arthur legends. It's a very specific, very complex kind of mirage that happens over big bodies of water, like the ocean. So how in the world do you make a ghost ship with just science? Well, here's how it works. First, you need just the right conditions, a layer of warm air sitting on top of a layer of really cold air right near the sea. Second, that boundary between the layers acts like a massive, powerful lens in the atmosphere. And finally, that lens can take a real ship, I'm talking about a physical ship that's way over the horizon where you could never normally see it, and project a warped, shimmering, ghostly-looking image of it up into the air. It makes it look impossibly close and totally unreal. This chart just lays it out perfectly, right? The two competing ideas. On one side, you have the legend, a glowing phantom ship, an undead crew, an omen of total doom. And on the other side, you have physics, an optical illusion, a trick of light and temperature projecting a weird-looking image of a perfectly normal ship. Okay, so if a Fata Morgana can explain a ghost ship that pops up out of nowhere and then vanishes, why are we still so obsessed with the Flying Dutchman? Why does the legend still have such a powerful grip on us? It's because the legend is about so much more than a ghost. It's a powerful metaphor, really. It's a classic cautionary tale about hubris, about one guy who in a moment of pure rage dared to challenge the awesome power of nature and ended up paying for it forever. For sailors out on that vast, lonely, dangerous ocean, the story gives a name to that deep-down anxiety they always felt. It's a reminder that no matter how good our technology gets, the sea is always bigger, it's always stronger, and some forces are just way beyond our control. And that really brings us to the final question, doesn't it? We can understand the atmospheric physics, the way light bends, all the tricks our eyes can play on us out at sea. But does knowing how the magic trick is done really make it any less powerful? Or does the legend of that cursed captain just keep on sailing, not just on the ocean, but in the deepest parts of our imagination? Well, that's something for you to decide.